June 4th, 1916, Volume 11. The very sins and bitternesses of people pour themselves down upon them, since Luisa cannot contain them completely. This morning my always adorable Jesus seemed to come. I squeezed him to my heart, and Jesus gave me a kiss. But as he was kissing me, I felt a most bitter liquid flow from his mouth into mine. I remained amazed in seeing that, without begging him, sweet Jesus was pouring his bitternesses into me, while at other times I had begged him so much, and he didn't concede that to me. Then, when I was filled with that most bitter liquid, Jesus continued to pour it. It spilled outside. It went on the ground. And he still kept pouring, in such a way that a lake of that most bitter liquid was formed around me and blessed Jesus. Afterwards, as if he felt relieved a little, he told me, "Daughter, have you seen how many bitternesses the creatures give me? So much that, unable to contain them any longer, I wanted to pour them into you, but you could not contain them either. So they went on the ground, and they will pour upon the people." While he was saying this, he marked the various points and towns which had to be stricken by the invasions of strangers. Some people were running away, some remained naked and starved, some mixed up, some killed. Horror and fright were everywhere. Jesus himself wanted to withdraw his glance from such tragedy. Frightened and terrorized, I wanted to prevent Jesus from doing this, but he seemed unshakable and told me, "My daughter, the divine justice is pouring their own bitternesses down upon them. I wanted to pour them in you first, in order to spare some points to make you content. Then I poured the rest upon them. My justice demands its satisfaction. And I, my love and my life, I don't know much about justice. If I pray to you, it is for mercy. I make appeal to your love, to your wounds, to your blood. After all, they are still your children, your dear images. Poor brothers of mine, what can they do? In what constraints will they be placed? To make me content, you tell me that you poured into me, but the points that you save are too few." And he, "On the contrary, it's too much. It is because I love you, otherwise I would have spared nothing. And even then, didn't you see that you could not contain any more of it?" I burst into tears, and I said, "Yet you tell me that you love me. Where is all this love that you have for me? True love knows how to make the beloved one content in everything. And then why don't you make me larger so that I can contain more bitterness and spare my brothers?" Jesus cried with me and disappeared. June 4th, 1918, Volume 12, Repetition of the Reparations of Jesus. Continuing in my usual state, I was saying to my beloved Jesus, "Do not disdain my prayers. It is your own words that I am repeating, your own intentions. Souls that I want just as you want them, and with your own will." And blessed Jesus told me, "My daughter, when I hear you repeat my words, my prayers, wanting as I want, I feel drawn toward you, as though from many magnets. And as I hear you repeat my words, my heart feels many distinct joys, and I can say that it is a feast for me. And while I enjoy it, I feel debilitated by the love of your soul, and I have no strength to strike the creatures. I feel in you the same chains which I put on the Father in order to reconcile mankind. Ah, yes, repeat what I did, Repeat it always if you want that your Jesus, in the midst of so many bitternesses, may find one joy from the creatures. Then he added, if you want to be safe, repair always, and repair together with me. Identify yourself with me so much as to form one single echo of reparations between me and you. Wherever there is reparation, the soul is as though in shelter, where she is protected from cold, from hail, and from everything. On the other hand, when there is not reparation, it is like being out in the middle of the street, exposed to lightnings, to hail, and to all evils. Times are most sad, and if the circle of reparations is not enlarged, there is the danger that those who remain uncovered may be struck by the thunderbolts of divine justice. June 4th, 1919, Volume 12. In order for redemption to be complete, Jesus was to suffer injustice, hatred, mockeries. And since the divinity was incapable of giving him these pains, this is why he suffered the passion from the hands of creatures on the last of his mortal days. I was thinking about the passion of my always lovable Jesus, especially when he found himself under the storm of the scourges, and I thought to myself, when did Jesus suffer more? In the pains which the divinity made him suffer during the whole course of his life, or on the last day from the hands of the Jews? And my sweet Jesus, with a light which he sent to my intellect, told me, my daughter, the pains which the divinity gave me surpass by far those which creatures gave me, both in power and in intensity, multiplicity, and length of time. However, there was not injustice or hatred, but highest love and accord on the part of all three divine persons in the commitment which I had taken upon myself to save souls at the cost of suffering as many deaths for as many creatures as would come out to the light of creation, and which the Father had granted to me with highest love. Injustice and hatred do not exist in the divinity, nor can they exist. Therefore it was unable to make me suffer these pains. But man, with sin, had committed highest injustice, hatred, and so forth, and in order to glorify the Father completely, I was to suffer injustice, hatred, mockeries, and so forth. This is why, on the last of my mortal days, I suffered the passion on the part of creatures, in which the injustices, the hatred, the mockeries, the revenges, and the humiliations that they used against me were so many as to render my poor humanity the opprobrium of all, to the point that I did not look like a man. They disfigured me so much that they themselves were horrified in looking at me. I was the abject and the refuse of all. Therefore I could call them two distinct passions. Creatures could not give me as many deaths or pains for as many creatures, and as many sins as they would commit. They were incapable of it. Therefore the divinity took on this commitment, but with highest love and accord on both sides. Besides, the divinity was incapable of injustice and so forth, so creatures took over, and I completed the work of redemption in everything. How much souls cost me! This is why I love them so much. Another day I was thinking to myself, my beloved Jesus has told me so many things, and have I been attentive in doing all that he taught me? Oh, how meager I am in pleasing him, how incapable I feel of everything. So his many teachings will be my condemnation. And my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, My daughter, why do you afflict yourself? The teachings of your Jesus will never serve to condemn you. Even if you did only once what I have taught you, you would still place a star in the heaven of your soul. In fact, just as I extended a heaven over the human nature, and my Fiat studded it with stars, in the same way I extended a heaven in the depth of the soul, and the Fiat of the good which she does, because any good is a fruit of my will, comes to embellish this heaven with stars. Therefore, if she does 10 goods, she places 10 stars in it. If 1,000, 1,000 stars. So think rather of repeating my teachings as much as you can, in order to stud the heaven of your soul with stars, so that it will not be inferior to the heaven that shines upon your horizon, and each star will carry the mark of the teaching of your Jesus. How much honor you will give me. June 4th, 1929, Volume 26. As the soul keeps doing the divine will, so does it expand in the soul, and the divine life grows within her, and the soul grows within the womb of her celestial Father. How one who lives in it makes the roll call of all creation. How, if one goes out of the divine will, he goes out while his acts remain. My abandonment in the Fiat continues. I feel within me such a need to live in it, that it has become more necessary to me than my own nature. Even more, I feel my nature changed into will of God. I feel it dissolved within it, and in all things, instead of finding myself, I find that Fiat that says to me, I am your life. Run, run always within me, in the sea of my light, to live of my acts, of my sanctity, of my happiness, and of all the goods I possess. But while I was crossing the sea of the divine Fiat, my sweet Jesus moved in my interior and told me, My daughter, as the soul keeps operating in my divine volition, so does it expand more within the creature, in such a way that for each additional act done in it, as much more growth does it form within her, and so the divine life can be seen growing in the creature in an admirable way. But this is not all. As the divine life grows in the creature, the more acts she does in my divine Fiat, the more the creature grows within the womb of her celestial Father. The Supreme Being opens his womb and encloses in it this happy creature, to raise her in a divine manner, to clothe her with royal garments, to feed her the food with their own hands, to embellish her with rare beauty. All of heaven remains amazed, enraptured, in seeing that their Creator raises a creature within his womb, and they say among themselves, He must be doing something great with her, for he loves her so much, and keeps her in such great custody as to raise her within his paternal womb. And all await the full growth of this creature, to see what will become of her. Therefore the prodigy of living of my will is unique. It communicates such power to one who lives in it, that she enters everywhere. And God himself loves and wants to raise her within his divine womb. Furthermore, the potential and the diffusion of the act done in my divine will is such and so great that she diffuses everywhere. She extends in the heavens, and it is as if she made the roll call of the stars. She extends in the sun, and she roll calls the light. She invests the air, the wind, the sea, and she roll calls the birds, the power of the wind, the waters, and the fish. And placing them all in order, she says to all with her act, Bow down and let us adore with double homage our Creator. That Fiat that created us is in my act, and with it I want to create new love, new adoration and glory for our Creator. And she extends not only in all created things, but she extends within the acts of the Virgin, in all the acts that I did upon earth, in the acts of her Creator, in those of all the saints, and from the first to the last, she calls the roll for all of them, and she makes the new life of love, of adoration, of glory for He who created her flow within them. It can be said that wherever my divine will is present, there extends the act of the creature done in my will. Even in hell they feel the power of a creature operating in my divine fiat, because just as all of heaven feels the new happiness, the glory, and the new love of the act of the creature done in my volition, so does hell feel the new torment of that divine will that they rejected, and that while it is present with them with justice, is there to torment them, and every time the creature operates in it, they feel the weight of justice more heavily upon them, and they feel themselves burning more. Just as nothing escapes my divine fiat, so does nothing escape one who operates in it. And as many times as she repeats her acts, so many times does she make the roll call to be sure that no one is missing in her act, to give the new glory, adoration, and love to that God thrice holy, and to that divine will that, with so much love, makes room for her, to let her live within itself, and allows her to extend within its endlessness. After this I was doing my round in the divine fiat, and I was gathering all created things, all the acts of creatures, to form one single act in the unity of it. And my lovable Jesus added, "My daughter, only my divine will possesses the one single act, and in its unity it embraces everything. It does everything. It gives life to everything. But while it does one act alone, this act possesses the font of all acts together, such that while they are the effects of the single act, they spread in the whole creation and descend for the good of creatures as real acts, while in the unity of the single act of the divine fiat, it is always one act alone, so much so that it never detaches a single effect from itself, nor can it detach it, because all the effects form the unity of its one single act. It happens as to the sun. One is the light, one is the act of light that it continuously sends to the earth. But as this one light touches the earth, the effects are innumerable and real. And this is so true that as the light touches the earth, one sees the effects changed into acts in such a way that one can see the variety of colors for the flowers, the diversity of sweetnesses for the fruits, and many other things. Has the sun perhaps lost even just one of the many effects that, as real acts, it has communicated to the earth? No. Jealous, it preserves them within its single act of light, more so since the strength, the fullness, and its one single act of light are formed of all the effects that it possesses. So the sun, symbol of my divine will, possesses innumerable effects. It gives them to the earth as real acts, without losing even one of them, and it does always one single act. If the sun created by us does this, much more so does my divine will. Now, my daughter, by doing his will, man went out of the unity of mine, and all his acts lost that strength of unity and remained scattered, some in one point, some in another, and divided among themselves. These human acts, not having unity, have no fonts of effects, nor fullness of light, and therefore they are symbolized by those plants and flowers that grow without sun, and because they are scattered and divided among themselves, they do not have a lasting strength, and they grow as meager and faded. So by doing his own will, man loses the unity with mine. He loses the font of life. He loses the fullness of light. Now, one who lives in my divine volition keeps gathering all the good scattered by creatures and forms one single act. And these acts become the right of one who does and lives in my divine fiat. There is no good that one who lives in my will cannot take. With the bilocating power of it, she calls, gathers, and unites all acts together, and ordering them all in my fiat, she gives me everything, and I give her everything. After this, I was continuing my acts in the Supreme Volition, and 1,000 thoughts crowded in my mind about its many wonders. But in order not to make it too long on paper, I will only say what Jesus told me. My daughter, what is done in my divine will remains dissolved in it. And just as light and heat are inseparable, and if the light is extinguished, the heat also is extinguished, and if the light is given life, by its own nature the light makes the life of the heat arise together with it. In the same way, the acts of the creature done in it are inseparable from my volition. More so since it is not subject to becoming extinguished, because it is eternal and immense light. This is why, though Adam went out of my will when he sinned, his acts remained in it. He was able to detach himself from his own acts, but his acts done in my will could neither go out nor detach themselves, because they had already formed their life of light and of heat within it. What enters into my will loses its own life in it. It forms one same life with it. It loses the rights to go out. And my will says, these acts have been done in my house, within my light. The rights are mine. And there is no power, either human or divine, that can make an act done by the creature in my will to go out of it and separate from it. This is why the acts of Adam done in it before he sinned are there, present as prime act on which depend the creation and the acts of the human generations. Now suppose that you went out from within my will. You go out and remain outside, but your acts do not go out. They neither have the right to go out, nor can they do it. And as long as you remain in my will, your acts are mine and yours. But if you go out, you lose the rights. And because they were done in the kingdom of my divine will, and not in the human will, they remain as my rights, even though they appear and are known as having been done by you. Now you must know that everything that you do in my fiat will serve as prime act for the other creatures in order to live in the kingdom of it, as order, regime, and life of those who will live in the kingdom of my fiat. This is why I exhort you so much in your going around in it. I watch over you. I accompany you. And many times I do it together with you, because not only do they serve you, but they must serve as prime acts and as models for those who must live in the kingdom of my divine fiat. June 4th, 1933, Volume 32. How one who lives in the divine will receives the creative strength of the continuous creation. Harmony with the divine will. My abandonment in the fiat continues. I am just newly born, and I feel the need of remaining in its arms in order to drink in large sips of the milk of its truths, so as to receive the waves of its light, the sweet refreshment of its heat. I feel that the divine volition also wants to keep me in its arms, clasped to its bosom of light, in order to be able to infuse in me the continuous act of its operating life in me, because life means having acts that never cease. Otherwise it could not be called life. Therefore, if I did not want to remain in its arms in order to receive these continuous reflections of its life, or it did not want to hold me, I would not be able to form its life in me, so that the word life would be reduced to words, or else into a painted picture, but not a reality. My Jesus, oh please, do not permit this, and may it be that you form the reality of its life in my soul. But while I sought to remain in the arms of the divine will, my sovereign Jesus, visiting my littleness, told me, "Daughter of my heart, you have reason that you feel the extreme need of remaining in the arms of the divine will, because remaining in its arms means placing oneself at its disposal and committing it to forming its life in the creature. If one does not place himself in its arms, one places himself at a long distance, and life is not formed from afar, but from near, rather identified with the same life that one wants to receive. No mother conceives her baby from afar, but within her own womb. No seed germinates and forms its plant if it is not identified and hidden under the earth. In the same way, to say that I want to form the life of the divine will in me, and not be identified in its arms, in harmony with it, in order to live of its same omnipotent breath, is impossible. You must know that our Supreme Being uses the same creative power that it used in the creation. It continues to use it in the acts that the creature does in the divine will. Every act that she does in it undergoes a new creation, and my fiat, in virtue of its creative power, remains conceived in the act of the creature. A continuous alternation occurs. She lends the act, and my divine will creates and conceives itself in her act. And while it is conceived, it forms its life and makes it grow with the nourishment of its light and of its love. The heavens are amazed, and so much is the marvel that they are struck mute before one single act of the creature that contains within itself the creative strength of the conception of the divine fiat. And since she, by remaining in its arms, places herself at our disposal, so with keeping her in our arms we place ourselves at her disposal. And she gives us her sweet pledge in order to make of her what we want, such that her life, her acts are so many pledges that she gives us, and we, keeping her pledges, feel ourselves secure to be able to put forth our creative virtue and operate as God in the act of the creature. You must know that when our will works, as much in ourselves as in the human act, it never sets aside its creative virtue, nor can it set it aside, because it possesses it by nature. Therefore, its doing is always creation. So one who lives in our will undergoes its creating act in her acts, and oh, how many marvels occur! Therefore be attentive and reverent and grateful. Receive in yourself, in your acts, this creating virtue that wants to do great things, not little, and only those worthy of our adorable will. End of June 4th. Fiat.